allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you all for coming this evening. Small group, summer meeting, small group on both sides of the table. Hopefully we'll have a couple more showing up on this end. That's all I have for comments. We'll move on to item 4.0, approve and amend minutes. We'll begin with the minutes from June 24th. You received a copy of those in your packet. Is there a motion to approve as written?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Steve, seconded by Alan. Okay, any discussion, any changes? Take a minute. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve, raise your hand. None opposed? Okay, that passes. We'll move on to the minutes from July 8th. Is there a motion to approve as written?
So moved.
Moved by Alan, second by Bill. Any further discussion on these? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. That passes. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.0, adjustments to the agenda. I know I've got one, there's an item here that some of you folks are interested in hearing about, and that would be item 10.6, state subsidy adjustment. If we could move that up to, why don't we change, can we change nominations? So make that 10.1 and make nominations 10.6. Any other adjustments? Patrick, did you have anything? Okay, we will move on to item 6.0, public comment section. If there's anyone from the audience who would like to speak, we don't have a mic set up, but I think that must be picking up on the camera. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Is it just in general, or can we wait and comment under certain?
We typically, what we do with our public comment section, we have two. We usually use the first one to, if you have comments specific to items on the agenda, we ask that you use that public comment section for that. Keep your comments to around 2 minutes. If there are other items that you'd like to speak to, we ask that you speak at the last public comment section and take as much time as you like. So.
Well, I'd be happy to speak first. And my name's Bill Giroux, I'm the city manager in Bath, and it would be regarding the state allocation to the RSU. My understanding is that the state's allocation to the RSU for 4 of the 5 towns was larger than what you expected. At the same, and correct me if I'm saying something that's not accurate. At the same time, the City Council approved the budget in June, early June, which is required by charter, and shortly thereafter, we started getting the indications from the legislature that the compromise meant that most of the towns in Maine were going to lose money in revenue sharing. We lost $226,000 some odd dollars, $236,000 some odd. And so we've got a budget hole that we need to correct, and the council discussed it briefly at their last meeting, and they intend to discuss it again on Wednesday night. The impact, the original budget was going to go up to Bath taxpayers by about a little over 5%, or right around 5%. Almost 4% of that is because of the RSU increases. And then the county had a decent sized increase this year, and then we had, in fact, when you increased your budget late in the process, we then decreased ours to get back to the 5% range. The revenue sharing cut brings us up in the 6% range. And so we understand that since you got more money in your school funding formula than, and Bath was allocated for, I think, 226,000 of that or somewhere around there. I think Woolwich, I think around 97,000, and I'll let them speak for themselves. But that essentially would solve the hole and keep the council from having to go up into a 6% tax range, which is high. We were 4% last year, would be 6% this year. Or they've got to make cuts. And so Wednesday night, they're going to start considering what jobs they would cut or leave vacant, or what other adjustments they would make, or whether it would be partly tax increase and partly cuts. And so I'm here to urge you to think about, as soon as possible, giving that money. My understanding is in the new funding formula, that is Bath's money. It's a matter of when you give it back, and that might be wrong too. That's my understanding.
I'm just going to stop you, only because we may be asking, since some of you folks are here from the municipalities, as we have this discussion, we may be asking information from you, but just to let you know that for the majority of this board, this is the first that
Okay.
so some of the stuff that you're talking about, there are members of the board that may be aware, the majority of the board really is not aware. That information is going to get presented to them tonight.
All right. Well, that's why I think it's odd to take the comment before you have your discussion.
I know. Well, that's the way our
I'm
agenda
happy to
runs.
do that.
Yeah.
And if that's the bulk of what I have to say, I'd be happy to talk again a little more, and I'll keep it brief after you have your discussion or answer questions you may have from us. And I'm not the expert on any of this.
Nor are we.
You may have some advice from your attorney, I'm not sure regarding.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I just want quickly on.
Steve.
Can we adjust the agenda further just to allow Patrick to give the explanation before we get more public comment on it, do you think?
Yeah, I think, or we could just move the public comment
Just not to
section.
cut you off, but just to put everything in the
We can move the public comment section, because I think the majority of the folks here are concerned about that particular item. Why don't we just move the public comment section to after we do the presentation on state subsidy? So why don't we move public comment to make it 10.2?
Does that make sense?
And then that will give you an opportunity to present to the board, and then we can get some feedback from the municipality.
Makes sense, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go with that, if that's fine with you, David. Okay. All right, so we'll move on then to item 7.0, committee reports. And we have one committee report, 7.1, Facilities and Finance Committee. I'll turn that over to Steve and Bill.
Facilities and Finance, we met again this week. We had asked Dave, our facilities person, to come back with a prioritization of the rather shocking list that he presented to us at last month's meeting in terms of the needs that the total system had. He brought that back, and we got into very substantive discussion around the issue of prioritization, of remediating certain deficiencies that exist in all of our facilities. We're going to meet again on Tuesday, coming right up.
Tomorrow?
Next week, on the 30th. And as a follow-up to that, we're going to be looking at the bonding issue, the possibility of refinancing our existing liabilities. We're getting into it both from the facilities perspective and very deeply now from the financial perspective. And that kind of wrap it up, Steve?
Yep.
Yeah, we don't have anything substantive yet, but we're moving. And we have some good information to work on. We're going to have some more on the 30th. And I think we're going to meet your deadline of coming up with a proposal before this summer is over, for September.
Great.
Okay?
Any questions from the board for the committee members? Okay, is there anything you wanted to add, Steve?
No.
All right, we'll move on to item 8.0, Superintendent's Report. Patrick?
I'll be brief. I'll give you a handout when I'm done, but like one board member had asked for just maybe an update from Dave Richards regarding the facilities work that's being done this summer, so I'll give you just a handout that you can take with you this evening. I just have one item. We had 5 students who were juniors at Morris High School attend Boys State at Thomas College, I think it was a couple weeks ago. Nathaniel Barter, Kyle Bonte, Kyle Heitella, Cody Lamora, and Joshua Valentine. And really what that is, if you're not familiar, American Legion sponsors that, and it's based on leadership and academics. This year, 2 more students received recognition. Kyle Bonte was selected as one of 5 students for being an outstanding citizen, which recognizes the most involved delegate at the municipal level. Kyle Heitella was selected as one of 2 students to attend Boys Nation in Washington, D.C., which takes place right now, July 19th to the 26th. Kyle had previously been elected by his peers to serve as the governor at Boys State. At Boys Nation, Kyle would serve as a senator representing Maine and had the opportunity to learn about the structure and functions of the federal government system. So 2 students that really represented Morris High School, all 5 did, but 2 that received honors. So I'd like to congratulate them. That's all I have. I'll pass this on to you.
Okay. We'll move on to financial report, item 8.2. Okay, Ruth?
You have in front of you a June report that is preliminary right now because I'm still waiting for the end of the June bills to come in. I think I have most of them. What's highlighted at the bottom is for $269,813 is what I'm anticipating at the time that this was put together to be carried forward into the next year. It may vary a couple of thousand here or there as the ending bills come in. I don't know of any that are out there, but usually there's a handful. We ended up pretty much on the expense side with spending $341,000 less than what we had anticipated or projected, and that is because of the freeze that we put on to accommodate the main care. And on the revenue side, because of the curtailment, which was the $165,000, we had some extra tuition revenues come in, mainly due to a higher tuition rate and a couple more students coming in, which helped to alleviate some of the 165. So we only had to make up the 71,000. So that's what brings that 341,000 down to the 269. So it will be somewhere, I would say, between 250 to 280,000 as an ending balance, which is pretty close when you're talking nearly a $26 million budget. So.
Okay, any questions for Ruth? Any questions for Ruth? All right.
Just what was the effect, if I can, of the freeze, or the curtailment? How much was? Does that question make any sense? We've had expenditures on hold through the budget year, and what was the effect of that on the budget? Do you know? How much was?
Well, I can't give you an exact figure of what was saved by putting the freeze on. If we had spent everything that we were going to spend
originally, we would have been considerably over because of the main care that was close to, well, it didn't come in quite as high, but we were projecting a $400,000 deficit in main care expenses. So we made that up and then some, you know, a little bit by putting the freeze on. But we had the freeze, was it 1st of October, I think, that we started that, so.
So we've reduced expenditures
It
through the
reduced
year
expenditures
by
enough.
around by about $500,000, probably. Somewhere in
Yeah.
that neighborhood.
Yeah, in order to accommodate the main care.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Ruth. Okay, on to item 9, old business. We've got a couple of second readings of policy. We'll begin with second reading of policy JICH, drug and alcohol use by students. Is there a motion on this policy?
Move we adopt it.
Second.
Adopted by Alan, seconded by Bill. Any further discussion on this? Any changes, comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to adopt, raise your hand. None opposed? That passes. Okay, second item, 9.2, second reading of policy GCSB, employee use of social media. Is there a motion? To adopt? Motion to adopt by Steve, seconded by Bill. Any questions, comments, changes on this one? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay. Passes. Okay, item 9.3, review of board goals. We tabled this at the last meeting. I think we need to, at some point, begin having the discussion about generating goals for next season, next year, next school year.
The August meeting would be an excellent time to do that, in light of
Yeah,
the information that we have to hear this evening.
okay.
So I move that we table till the August meeting
Okay, but we'll begin the discussion of new goals.
for new goals for next year.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to new business and item 10.1, state subsidy adjustment, and I'll turn it over to Patrick.
Yeah, I'll go through this quickly, but Bill did a pretty good job at the beginning of the meeting, just kind of summarizing this. We first got a hint of this, I think it was late June, 1st of July, that our subsidy may be increased, which is positive news, which I kind of chuckle about. This should be positive, and sometimes positive news has different nuances that go with it. But the new subsidy amounts are as followed: an increase of $6,547 for Rouseck, $226,250 for Bath, $36,421 for Phippsburg, and $93,512 for Woolwich. So that's the increases per town for subsidy. First point that I'd like to make is that the RSU will not and cannot increase expenditures for the approved FY14 budget. We'd have to go back to the voters to have that approved, and we don't intend to. The second point, as Bill pointed out earlier, is that there's no question that the increase in subsidy does fall to the towns, and the towns should receive credit to reduce their assessments for education. The question really for the board to talk about and discuss tonight is whether the school board should do this now and apply it to the FY14 budget assessments, or wait and apply it to the FY15 school budget assessments. I've talked to Bill a little bit, haven't talked with Woolwich. Those are the two biggest receivers. I know that there is towns that are struggling with finances right now and in difficult situations. I also know that, I don't know if it's the same in every town, but that towns do commit taxes middle of August to end of August in certain towns. I'm not sure how consistent that is amongst the RSU here. So again, it's not just RSU1 that's struggling with this a little bit, or this is the first time it's happened. It's a unique situation, but I know from talking to our attorney that this is happening across the state because it was not, this information was not provided to us until the middle of the summer when we form a budget and the budget gets approved for us in the middle of June. So really that's, the information that we have. Ruthie has all the numbers on the ED 279 form that's been updated. So really that's, I'm not sure how much more information I can give you at this point. I sent you an email to kind of give you as much as we know at this point. Ruthie, I don't know if you want to add anything that...
No, I think that's pretty much the point, is do it now or do it later.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So, for members of the board, Steve and I were made aware of this about a week ago, and we had some discussions with Patrick about this. We thought the best way to approach it would be to have a dialogue here tonight about what the plan was with this money, how we were going to handle it, and we talked about voting on it at the next meeting. Due to the timeliness of this issue, it may be something that we want to vote on in the next week or so, or if you feel comfortable, we can vote on it tonight. But I just felt that, one, this is a completely new situation for the board. We've never experienced this before. And two, with my experience on the board, I've found that we've had an awful lot of challenging decisions to make over the past 3 or 4 years, and I want to make sure that we think about all the implications of this decision and do our best to get it right and not be hasty about it. So, that said, I've had a little briefing on it, Steve has had some briefing on it, but I think for the rest of you, this is the first you're hearing of this. So I'm going to open up the floor to the rest of the board to comment or ask questions, but ultimately we need to decide the best way to handle these funds. David?
Well, it's my understanding that the money ultimately goes to the town. And as Patrick has pointed out, it's a matter almost of do we do it now or do we do it later? Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, as Mr. Jaringovich pointed out, at least Bath, speaking for Bath, they have significant problems now. And in a way, since it's, one way to look at it anyway, is it's their money, why not give it to them? Is there something wrong, or am I overlooking some reasoning here?
There's some complexity out there that we're not aware of.
Well, the only complexity is that the overage occurred as we represented a total education package to the public. So the monies essentially were generated based on an education plan which resulted in a certain tax levy that would apply to each of the towns. And so it was made with the premise that those funds are to be directed at education for an educational purpose. If the funds were returned to the town presently, obviously I can't speak for the town, but it likely will not be used. Well, I shouldn't say likely. It won't be used for an educational purpose. The funds will be applied to other kinds of funding needs which the towns legitimately have because their revenue sharing was cut. But that's roads, that's other staff positions, etc. So essentially, the RSU is generated through a very fortunate yet unfortunate set of circumstances has generated a surplus based on, again, based on representation of an education plan to the taxpayer. And now we are in a position of handing over $300,000 or $400,000 to the towns. And if done now, it won't be used for education.
That's parsing it pretty narrowly, though, in a sense, I think. I think your point is well made, but indeed, the money really seems to belong to the towns in a way. Whatever we have said in terms of educational requirements for the money, notwithstanding that would, at least, that's the way it seems to me, anyway. I could be
Well,
wrong.
if we took the $300,000 or $400,000, if we had been aware of the increased level of subsidy, our tax levy, the RSU's tax levy out to taxpayers would have been less. I don't know how much less.
Right.
0.3, 0.4%.
Right.
We did not get, our budget did not pass easily. The margin in Bath passed it, but not by a huge margin. It did not get support in West Bath. It wasn't necessarily an easy lift for the RSU to get, or for the board, the RSU board, to get its budget adopted by the taxpayers. And it would have arguably, it would have been easier had we been able to go out with a smaller budget. And that didn't happen. So that's the question. I'm not arguing it one way or the other, but if we were to hold on to the money, I'll use the word hold on. If the RSU were to return to credit the towns with the subsidy next year, the amount of taxes that we would have to raise as an RSU probably would be less, like $300,000 or $400,000 for educational purposes. But arguably, it's money that follows the town. It does go back to the town one way or the other, whether it's, as you said, it's a question whether it happens now or happens later.
Alan?
Well, it seems to me that both the city and municipalities and we run into crisis every year when it comes to finances. I think that it would only be fair to relieve the burden that they have now, and everybody take the view that next year we will face the crisis that comes up, which will be one, at that time. But the money was generated for this year. We can't spend it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but it would have no effect on our educational program as we're going to present it this year, right? So I say give the money back this year, and I hope they have good memories when we ask for help next year.
My only caution, Mr. Chairman, is around legal issues. Counsel was mentioned previously. We have consulted with counsel and have a direction.
We don't.
We've got
And-
ourselves in trouble before.
Right, and that's a good point. Here's the situation with legal counsel. Patrick has spoken to our attorney, and our attorney has sort of shared what we can and cannot do with the money, but when we asked for an opinion on this, they wouldn't give us an opinion. For a number of reasons, one being, the newness of this situation, that districts have not experienced this before, and two, because this council advises other districts, and each district is unique, the attorney or the firm did not want to give an opinion that might be favorable to one school district and not favorable to another district. So they're standing on the sidelines watching this one play out.
So whose advice do we have that we can either give the money back now or later?
It's my understanding, Patrick,
Yeah, I mean,
it came from our council.
Yeah, our attorney in Drummond Woodson has talked to us several times, is comfortable with towns, doing what they feel is in their best interest in the community. You know, he can see both sides. He can see keeping the money until the following year, just for the reasons that you articulated, Steve, versus knowing your communities, knowing the situation that you're in. And again, what we can't do is we can't spend it, you know, like the points I covered. But as far as when a board decides to reduce the assessment, and Ruthie, correct me if I'm wrong, but for all of our towns, you know, you get every month you get a bill for your assessment, and basically we're just reducing that assessment. So it's about timing, either do it now or later, really. And so when I talked to him this morning, again, I mean, he was, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but he was comfortable with us either way of doing this. So again, I know it's not a clear-cut answer, but
I'd just like to put these options on the table just to sort of clarify the point. I mean, as we see it, and from what Patrick has said, clearly the dollars that are generated, that are coming back from the state, have to follow the municipalities. They're going back to the municipalities one way or the other. We've sort of narrowed it down to, we have two options. Do we return the funds this year, or do we do it next year? But either way, it's going back to the municipalities. To me, the advantage of doing it now is, as I said to Patrick, it's the hot potato syndrome. We get it out of our hands and into their hands, and we're done with it. The advantage to giving it to them next year is, again, the district got a little bit of a black eye this year because of the size of our budget and the amount of the increase that we were asking the municipalities. By giving the subsidy next year, it's almost like a credit against what we did this year. Had we received that subsidy this year, or what we had gone out to the municipalities for in terms of the local contribution, would have been, you know, less. My big concern is, okay, those are the advantages. I want to make sure that we've thought about what are the disadvantages to either one of those scenarios, and are there any implications that we're not thinking about, that 3 months or 6 months or 3 years is going to come back to bite us. And again, I speak from experience. That's what I want to get out of the board.
Is it possible this adjustment can be readjusted at some point?
No, not that I'm aware of.
We're 100% sure that that can't happen.
no, I think it is what it is. Yeah.
As far as I know.
I've asked that question a couple times. I can't control everything, but yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Does they have
My
like a
concern
special
would be
session?
is that this changes, and then we've given back the money, and then we're short. Then how do we get that back? If that happens.
That's a good point, and again, I think that from what Ruth had told me, and correct me if I'm wrong, we receive this payment in 12-month installments. We don't get it as a lump sum. So, again, if we were to return it this year, I think that it would go out in 12-month installments. Is that correct? We wouldn't have the funds to prepay that.
I bill them, I send an assessment to them, and they send monthly, even monthly payments to the
It's
RSU.
just still that less.
So it would be that much less.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So if there is a change, we would only be, whenever that would happen, if it would ever happen, they just would be
Yeah.
after the fact.
So any other comments from the board? Does the board, I mean, we've got folks from the municipalities here. Do you have any questions for folks representing the municipalities?
One thing I'm concerned is that the attorneys are waiting on the side, to see what's gonna happen. That makes me a little nervous, that they don't wanna make a decision either way. They don't want us to be the guinea pigs to lay ourselves out there. It seems to be a little risky to be hasty, just to, I mean, everybody's tight with budgets and stuff. And I'm a little nervous running ourselves out there to be the guinea pigs. And
Could you folks speak to the timeliness of it? Go ahead, David.
I would love to. Dave King, representing the town of Woolwich. I've got several points I'd like to make. We're looking at a $509,000 increase in our RSU budget this year. A mill in our town is $332,000. We're looking at a $1.5 million increase just for education. $93,000 off of that would be an awful big help. The other thing is, I would hate to artificially raise $93,000 from my constituents this year that I don't need to. Even though I know I'm going to give it back to them supposedly next year. I mean, there was a president a few years ago, I'm not sure which one it was, that said raising more taxes than absolutely necessary is legal robbery. And I don't want to be a party to that. And as far as the downside of this, it's, if you folks decide to hold this money for a year, the downside is going to be I'm going to be screaming at the top of my lungs that we're unnecessarily raising $93,000 that we don't need to tax our citizens at. So I mean, that's a third of a mill for me. It's almost $93,000 is almost a third of a mill. And for a town our size, without an industrial base, I mean, we're basically a bedroom community. We have very few businesses and very few industries. We have a couple, but not a lot. Our greatest source of income is our property tax. And I don't want to go up on that any more than I absolutely have to. We're losing $68,000 in our revenue sharing this year. So the 93 would be a nice gift that we didn't see coming. Years ago, just to give you a little history on this, years ago almost every town in Maine had a March town meeting. And back then the state always came out with all the subsidies for education and everything in April. So we all got smart, we moved our town meetings to May. And then the state immediately went to June. So, I mean, we can keep playing leapfrog. I mean, eventually we're going to end up, if we keep doing this, that we're going to end up with a year where we don't have a town meeting trying to get ahead of the state. But, I mean, so it does make it hard. It makes it hard for us to budget as well as you. I can appreciate what you're doing. But we don't go to commitment until September. So if we could get the money back this year, that's $93,000 that Lloyd and Allison and I and the other two selectmen don't have to tax people. So I'm pleading with you to give us the money this year.
So Dave, what you're saying is you would use those dollars to offset the taxes that you levy to the taxpayers in Woolwich?
Tax dollar is a tax dollar. The taxpayer doesn't, we break it down, of course, on the tax bill. But, I mean, they say that they're sending us $2,000. I mean, rather $1,200 of that's going to education and $800 is going to municipal costs or whatever. I mean, we're not in a position where we can lay anybody off. We only have 3 employees. We don't have a public works department, we don't have a sheriff's department, we don't have a... So, I mean, we have no choice but to go up on the mill rate. So there is no fat in our budget. There is practically nothing that we can cut out. So I'm really pleading with you folks to give us the money.
The unfortunate thing is that the RSU went up on your bill.
Right.
And we wouldn't have done, had we had the information available to us today.
I understand where you folks are at.
So you're coming out whole, but we're the bad guys, in a sense.
I don't see how it affects you, because a dollar from the left pocket's the same as a dollar. I mean, really, all you're going to do is reduce the amount we send you in each one of our 12 monthly payments, and it's going to be made up for by the state. So I don't see where it affects your budget at all.
It doesn't affect our budget, but it affects the representation or the presentation of what we did to the towns, to the voters. And I go along with Alan. If folks have a good memory.
I think you have an excellent argument to support that in the fact that you didn't see this coming. I mean, you guys are in the same boat that we're in. You have to do your budget before the state gives you the final number. And again, we can keep trying to leapfrog ahead to get on the other side of the state, but the state's just going to keep moving. So
Okay.
More than anything else, I see this as a good faith act on our part.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I do too.
Okay, are there any other questions for David? Paul? Can you just, because we're being filmed, just state your name? and-
Paul Mattiosian, I'm the Assistant City Manager in Bath. I just wanted a point that Stephen made about the perception on the tax bill. But each year when we create a tax bill, we show on it how many mills from the school. That will be adjusted, and the perception that you raised it X% will actually be reduced when that state subsidy is credited to us and your allocation to us is reduced. That will show up on the tax bill as a lower number. I'm just trying to be clear. You will get the credit for not having raised taxes as much as was perceived back when before the state passed their budget and we were all sort of guessing.
Any questions from the board for Paul? Okay. Bill?
If I could just say one more thing, Bill
Yep.
Giroux, City Manager in Bath again. I can't speak for the council, just like Pat wouldn't speak for you, but the council, like you, has already adopted their expenditure budget. They don't intend to go hire some more people and buy some more things if you release this money this year. They are strictly looking at it as reducing the city's taxes. You would reduce the city's taxes by doing this. And I think people are going to know that you're doing that. And like Paul says, when the bill goes out, they're going to know. And to me, that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, is you struggle hard through your budget, you got some big capital issues coming ahead of you, we're always struggling with. We all want to keep taxes down if we can, because that's what people want. This keeps taxes down this year. And like Alan says, we're going to have to fight next year's battle when we get there. But as it is, when you're talking about 6% tax increase, we've got to try to do what we can. That really hits people. You own homes in this area. That hits people, and we've got to be concerned about that and try to keep it down to the greatest extent possible. And that's why we're urging you to approve this. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board for Bill? Any further discussion from the board?
To me, Mr. Chairman, if I may, perception doesn't mean a darn thing to me. I want to do what's right for the school system, which I believe we're doing, and I certainly want to be fair to our member communities. It certainly would appear that we could act tonight and make sure that the communities receive credit for the additional funds. I think it's the right thing to do, and as long as it doesn't impact what we're doing, which Patrick has said it will not, and I'll take him at his word, I think we should move on it tonight.
Can I get a motion?
I'd be happy to make a motion. Spell it out for me.
So there's at least a motion that we vote on it this evening.
That we vote on it this evening, yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Alan. So there's a motion on the floor by Bill, seconded by Alan, that we vote on this evening. Any further discussion
On that particular motion?
on that motion? Okay, the only thing that, like I said, and I tend to be conservative, I just want the municipalities to know that I want to make sure the RSU is doing the right thing and that there are no repercussions from this. And I hesitate to act hasty, but I understand the timeliness of what you folks are facing, so. Anyway.
Do you have something you wanted to discuss? I was just...
I'm just commenting on the motion
No, I'm sorry,
to vote on it tonight.
Yeah, I
I
just...
kind of, I feel the same with you. I feel like we're moving pretty quickly here without, I just found out, this, besides all the details, and we don't have a definitive thing legally. I'm just worried about that part, that we're going to move too quickly, not do something correctly. Perception really is not important. I just want to make sure that we don't get ourselves into some other issue or trouble that we're not foreseeing. And again, going back to the point of when our legal counsel is standing on the side watching, it makes me a little nervous to
Right.
rush forward to make a decision tonight when we just got this information today.
Before we vote then, I'm going to ask the municipalities, would it be detrimental to you folks if we were to wait a week as a board before we voted on this? Or are there issues that are pressing that you need to know what the school district's going to do tonight?
Again, the council has already discussed the budget cuts once and intends to discuss them again Wednesday. I guess I'm a little confused because my understanding is that the legal advice was you either give it back now or you give it back later. That's not unclear. So there is, I don't know what other legal opinion we need. You're either giving it back now or you're giving it later, and you can do either one. So I don't know what further legal advice you need. We would prefer a decision sooner rather than later. Obviously, that's up to the board as far as when they can make the decision.
Right.
It certainly wouldn't matter to Woolwich if you waited another week, other than the fact that we are actively working on budget issues all the time, and the sooner we know, the better. I mean, we don't go to commitment till September, but I can't personally think of any reason you would not want to give the money back this year. I mean, both gentlemen from the city of Bath said, it'll be reflected on the tax bill that you are charging us less than we anticipated. And I think the average taxpayer is smart enough to know that, this was pennies from heaven that you guys didn't see coming. And I don't see any reason to wait another year. I mean,
Sure.
in the 40 years I've been involved in municipal government, we always keep hearing, we've got to wait till things get better. Well, I haven't found that year yet. So as Alan said, we'll fight next year's battle next year, and any help you can give us this year would be of great assistance.
Okay.
So any help you can give us next year would be a great.
So there's a motion on the table to vote on this issue this evening. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of voting on this evening, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, the motion passes. So back to the issue at hand, is there any further discussion on the issue?
One part I'm not clear on is, one thing that Steve brought up was, when we brought this and we voted on the budget, the impact is of us voting on that budget and the amount of tax we're going to levy. And does this impact if we give that back? I mean, is there some implication to that? It's not clear about this refund. We're going to be changing the amounts, and we voted on very specific things at those town meetings, and then how much.
I'm not sure what you're asking, or maybe Patrick, you can answer the
The
question.
assessments that we put out there.
Correct.
Are 300 and some change
Yes.
higher
Correct.
across the towns, and that these assessments would be adjusted
Right.
for a lower amount.
And I'm sure everybody would have voted yes. However, that's not what we voted on. That's not what we voted on. Those numbers are now changed.
Right.
We didn't have a town meeting, we didn't have a vote on those. And I'm sure that they would have passed, people would want a reduction. My point about the legal issue is, we didn't approve that. What we approved is different, and now we're gonna change that. And can we change that in this year? Because we already voted on a certain number. Those things are now in documents that we voted on, it's been signed, it's already done. And now we're saying we're just gonna change it. And I know that if we had to vote again, I'm sure everybody would vote, and that's my concern. Is that issue.
Would not the lawyers that we've consulted have made an issue of that if it were
Yeah, I mean,
critical?
and not to get into the weeds tonight, but we've talked about all of that as far as, going out to vote again, the cumbersome process, some of the things that are on statute that talks about you have to have more people voting the second time you go through that than you did the first time. It's just not, according to our attorney, it's not a workable process. And that this is the first time, I think in recent memory, that the state has given additional subsidy after the fact. If we had gotten this money in May, what would we have done with it as a school system then? I mean, we probably would have gone in with those numbers. And we got these after the fact, which is out of our control. And so our legal counsel said they were very comfortable with us, applying that for the FY14, which is what we're talking about. and/or, waiting to the FY15.
So they were comfortable us making that adjustment
Yes.
without going back.
Okay.
Is that written down somewhere?
I can get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Again, we tried to get an opinion
I mean, again, we've had, I think, we've had, I don't know, and again, this should be good news. I know we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, but we've had probably at least a handful of discussions with our attorney, with some of the towns that have had questions, and really tried to, again, I know what Tim's saying tonight, and I wouldn't fault you for if you're not comfortable tonight, but we've had numerous discussions to try to keep this all above board, transparent, and getting the best advice we can. And it's really what they've been informed us is that it's a timing issue, really. We give it, because of our unique circumstances as an RSU1, that subsidy does follow the town, and that credit is there.
Okay. So, we're going to vote on this tonight. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I will.
Go ahead, Alan.
I move that we return the funds to the municipalities in FY14.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Bill. Do we need to phrase that any other way? Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Passes. Okay.
So you won't see us next week.
So we will move on to,
Accountable for history.
Yeah, we'll see you next year.
you're welcome.
Thank you all.
Let's move on to, I need to take a break. We're taking a break, or if you want to take over the meeting. I got a bunch of calls. I've got to follow up on something.
Go for it. First public comment is over, the state subsidy is over, and we've got nominations.
Was there nominations next, is it?
All right.
Nominations is 10-6, so that's, we should go to
Oh, yeah,
resignations 10-2.
that's right. 10-2 is resignation. Another page. Here we go.
All right, we just did 10-1. Let's dissolve the chaos.
Public discipline.
10-2 resignation, Patrick.
Yeah, I just have one resignation for you this evening. Tammy Baxter, grade 5 teacher, and I'd just like to thank her for her years of service to RSU1.
Let's move on to the
So resignation this evening?
It doesn't require a vote?
No, just FYI.
10-3, item 10-3, school lunch price increase.
Yeah, I put in your backup that according to Ellen Beal, our food service director, and according to state regulations, we need to increase our K lunches from 2:30 to 2:35 and increase our high school lunches from 2:50 to 2:55. And breakfast will remain the same.
Is it reasonable to ask why?
It's
Other why they want us to do it?
yeah, I mean, they're trying to get everybody consistent across the state of Maine. Yeah, and we raised it, remember last year, we raised it again, so usually by a nickel to try to get up to a certain price. I mean, it doesn't affect free and reduce, I mean, the students are free and reduced.
What is that number that's, do you have an idea?
It fluctuates, I mean, it's around, I think it's 250, I don't know for sure, but I think it's closer to 250 for elementary, and we're at 230, 235, we're trying to keep it average. So we just need your approval to be able to do that, because Ellen is, I know it's only July 22nd, but she's, getting ready to update the website and get information out to parents about lunch prices for next year.
Will the increase be approved?
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the increase, raise your hand. None opposed? Okay, that passes. Right, we'll move on to item 10.4, contract for educational services. You received some information in your packet, and I'll turn it over to Patrick to describe what this is about.
Yeah, our bidding, purchasing requirements for the district, policy, DJ, and we have a lot of policies, but this is one that I try to follow because Sometimes you read in the newspapers in Maine, but also across the country, that sometimes boards don't know about purchases that are of a significant amount of money. This one's a little unique because it's for educational services, it's grade schools partnership, and it's to be working with Morse High School. And it is specific. It's a specific skill that we're looking for in an organization. And we used grade school partnership, I think it was 3 years ago, before I arrived here. And what it does is really provides us with a coach for 20 days at Morse High School, 20 to 25 days, as well as you may not have this piece, but there's a thing called I Walk Through Classroom Observations, which is not part, we get that, which is about a $3,000 cost. But they're really working with our staff, forming a leadership team at Morse. It was very successful 3 years ago, and we're hoping to get back the same coach. But really to get us to a point where we're doing data analysis, action planning, and especially with a new principal coming on board, again, forming a leadership team at Morse, and really working towards proficiency-based learning. So they focus on high schools. The reason I bring it to your attention tonight instead of just doing it is if you read that policy, it talks about, services over 10,000 usually go up for proposals, and that I, as a superintendent, may forego those if I feel like expertise or specific service is unique, which I think it is in this case, but I wanted you to know that we did reach out to another organization and asked them for if they were interested or whether they wanted a quote, and we felt like this was the best one, Grade Schools Partnership out of Portland. So we'd like to start working with them in September this year at Morse, and so whether I'm not trying to be nebulous here, but whether you feel like you want to approve this tonight, or whether, I'm supposed to inform you of our decision before we enter into a contract. So before I get back to them, I just wanted to see if you had any questions about this.
Are there any questions for Patrick on this?
The emphasis is going to be on proficiency-based.
Yeah, it's not going to be, I'll be honest with you, in my opinion, it's not going to be, we're not looking for, I don't even know what the RSU is, but, another RSU in the state of Maine that maybe is gone, leaps and bounds and maybe looks very different than a more traditional high school. But we're looking at moving, and what we liked about them was they came and made a presentation about how to I guess I would say maybe a little bit slowly move towards proficiency-based learning, but that is some of the focus, as well as developing some teacher leaders and really working with us to move in that, that expectation, because graduation requirements coming up soon are going to be
Well, the deadline is
proficiency-based.
about 3 years,
Yeah,
so
right.
we better get
Yeah.
moving. We better get going on it.
But Alan, I guess what I'm trying to say is not bite off more than we can chew. We want to make sure we do this right.
Well,
So
yeah.
and using them instead of who have a lot of expertise, I think is going to be very beneficial for us.
Any other questions for Patrick? The only thing I had when I was looking over this contract, and I noticed you've got it here, but we didn't receive this, the specifications of the contract were contained in attachment A. And I want to make sure that there's really nothing in the information that we receive that details what our expectations are and what the outcomes are going to be. And I know in any kind of contractual relationship, what you think you're getting and what they think they're giving may be two different things. You want to make sure that that's spelled out.
Yeah.
So I would just ask, I don't want to hold this up, but I would ask if you could maybe email us
Sure.
as a board, what we should expect to get out of this contract,
Yeah.
what our expectations are from grade school partnerships, and what the outcomes will be once this contract is fulfilled.
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Where do these dollars come from? Are these-
This is being our professional development line. And/or possibly Title II, some Title II money as well.
So when we built the budget, do we plan for this kind of
Yeah.
services?
Yeah.
This is something that we were planning.
Right, yeah, we were hoping that we could make this work, and we're starting to strategize some outside sources of funding, but we'll be able to afford it for next
I
year.
think you're right.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this contract? All right, is there a motion?
I'll move to accept the contract.
Motion to accept by Kyle, second by Dave.
There you go.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, passes. All right, we'll move on to item 10.5, Apple lease approval. Patrick?
Yeah, just another lease. I mean, we went through the budget process, as you recall, and Dean came many times and presented to you, and the recommendation was to move forward with Apple. And so, you know, in order to do this right, I gave you the backup, all kinds of fancy stuff, but then I also sent you, you know, a motion tonight, because usually when we have big leases that we enter, we often will run those by our attorneys just to make sure that we're covered and there's nothing that we're not seeing in the fine print. And so I know it's a lengthy motion that, you know, I tried to send you ahead of time so we could walk through that. But Dean, I don't know if you want to comment at all, but I mean, this is going to allow us to start to purchase for the elementary schools.
Yeah, what this lease does is restart our 4-year rotation. We used to have a series of leases in place that would rotate so that every school was getting new technology every 4 years. And that was discontinued somewhere along the way. And so this is the first step in putting that back in place. So this pays for basically labs at the elementary schools, as well as some additional technologies such as iPads for classrooms and that sort of thing. It's the first step. It's by no means all that we need, and it's not entirely reflective of student populations at each individual school. It's a base level for us to begin.
Okay.
Any questions? Alan?
Is that going to take care of the middle school next year, which the 6th grade needs to have computers for taking their test, which they had not had in the past?
The 6th grade takes their tests at the library lab, and that is part of the refresh. So they'll continue to take their tests there.
So they're filtered through class by class?
Correct.
Rather than all as a group?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dean?
Will this improve that functionality at all? Because that was one of the concerns there when I went through. Will this refresh make it any easier at all, or will it be just the same as it is now?
You mean as far as testing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't increase dramatically the number of devices. It's basically replacing a lab that's already in place. We'll redeploy those older computers to other purposes. So there will be a total number of more computers in the rooms, but it's not going to be in a way that the 6th grade is suddenly going to have 2 labs available to them. So no, I'm sorry, it doesn't really address that.
Steve, did you have a question?
I just wondered what piece of the overall technology plan this represents. This is the elementary schools,
K-6.
K-6.
Correct. With the exception of Woolwich. Woolwich is not represented in this at all because they just received such, tremendous amount of technology last year. So what we'll do is they'll actually have to go a stretch year. They'll go 5 years before they get rolled into the next lease in 4 years.
You still have a middle school piece there, and there's a high school piece.
Yeah, this doesn't include MLTI. MLTI grades 7 through 12 are covered through an entirely different lease agreement, which is actually the state of Maine acts as the leasing agent. So for us, we simply participate in that, and they bill us.
So just to jump to that, I mean, we're using Apple's, right?
Correct.
We defaulted to, and you've already initiated that.
Yes.
That's been initiated.
Yes. Yeah, and we received teacher devices. We should receive student devices by mid-August.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Dean? Any other questions about the lease? Patrick, do we need to make this lengthy motion?
We do.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Would anybody like to make this lengthy motion?
I'll do it. if you want to.
Go ahead, Tom.
Do you have it like printed?
Here you go.
I move that the vote entitled Vote to Authorize Lease Purchase of Computers, Servers, and Network Equipment in the principal amount of $215,672.17 be adopted in form presented to this meeting, and that a copy of said vote be filed with the minutes of this meeting. Vote to authorize lease do I have to read that part?
No. Oh, well, no, this down here, yeah.
Okay. Be it hereby voted as follows. 1, that under the pursuant to provisions of Title 20 AMRS Sections 1001 and 1055, the superintendent of schools is authorized to execute and deliver a master lease purchase agreement and lease schedule with Apple Inc. or its nominee or assignee in the name and on behalf of the Regional School Unit 1 for computers, servers, and network equipment with the aggregate purchase price of $215,672.17 for a lease term not to exceed 48 months, and in such form and on such terms not inconsistent herewith, as the superintendent may approve said approval to be conclusively evidenced by the execution and delivery thereof. Number 2, that the superintendent is authorized to execute and deliver an escrow agreement with the leaser in connection with the lease, if applicable, to hold funds in escrow account or similar equipment acquisition funds pending disbursement for the equipment. Said escrow agreement to be on such terms not inconsistent with this vote as the superintendent may approve, including without limitation a provision granting leaser a security interest in the escrow account. Said approval to be conclusively evidenced by the execution and delivery thereof. Number 3, the appropriate official of the RSU are authorized to execute and deliver such other documents and certificates that may be required in connection with this lease. 4, that there is no part of the proceeds of the lease shall be used directly or indirectly to acquire any securities and obligations, the acquisition of which would cause the lease to be private active bond or arbitrage bond within the meaning of sections 141 and 148 respectively of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 as amended. Number 5, the superintendent is authorized to designate the lease as a qualified tax exempt obligation within the meaning of section 265B3 of the code. Number 6, that the superintendent is authorized to covenant on behalf of the RSU to file any information report and pay any rebate due to the United States in connection with the issuance of the lease, and to take all lawful actions necessary to ensure the interest portion of the lease payments under the lease will be executed from the gross income of the owners thereof for purposes of federal income taxation, and to refrain from taking any action which would cause such interest portion of the rental payments to be included in gross income of the owners thereof. And finally, number 7, that to attest copy of this vote be included in the minutes of this meeting.
Is that your motion?
That's it.
Could you repeat that?
I'll second that.
I think
Dave will second it. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand.
I'm voting yes just because I had to read it.
All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right, we'll move on to item 10.6, nominations. We have half a dozen nominations for this evening. I'll turn that over to Patrick.
Yeah, one I'll take off is health teacher at Woolwich Central School. We thought we might have a candidate for you tonight, but we don't. We've gone back out to advertise for that again. It's part-time, so it's a little bit more difficult to find. So I'll read down through these, and I won't go in this order, but I assume you want to take them as a group like we normally do, but I'll go down through them. I think you have it in your backup anyway, but we're pleased to nominate Maria Newcomb to be the new full-time health teacher at Bath Middle School. She's coming from Brunswick High School as a health teacher right now. Grade 5 at Fisher Mitchell, Heather Jordan is the recommended candidate, and she's most recently been an SED 61 at Songo Locks Elementary School, I think for the last 5 years as a grade 5 teacher. Title I teacher at Dyke Newell, Evelyn Katz, who actually has been an ed tech at Phippsburg the last several years, is moving into that position. Grade 3 at Fisher Mitchell, Ashley Hoskins, who actually did her student teaching at Fisher Mitchell in 5th grade, and they were very pleased with her. And the music teacher 40% at Morse High School is Sandra Foreman, who has been a choral music teacher at Freeport, at Lincoln Academy, and also for, I think, 7 or 8 years at Wiscasset High School. The one that came in a little bit later is because of timing, but we'd like to nominate tonight is grade 5. I think I sent that to you in an email. The grade 5 at West Bath is Rob Schultz. And Rob, I think last year was teaching at Governor Longley School in Lewiston in grade 5, his most recent experience. So principals are very excited about these nominees, and I don't know if you have any questions.
Any questions for Patrick?
We still have any unfilled?
Yeah, we have advertised the health, and we are going to be interviewing very soon for the guidance opening at high school. And if we don't find a suitable candidate, we'll re-advertise that because we still have time. And we have a couple, we have some ed techs, but as far as teaching positions, most of them are filled at this point. We have the life skills teacher at Woolwich, the new program starting up. We have to find a suitable candidate for that as well.
This position at the high school, how does that affect the situation that we have in Woolwich with the music teacher there?
No,
Has that situation been cleared up, or is it still hanging?
No, I think that's pretty much been resolved. This music teacher, talking to Peter, but also talking to Jay, our new principal, that 40% will meet the scheduling needs that we have, and I believe that we've resolved, that other piece as well. That will also may be of assistance to the high school in some way. So.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move acceptance of the people given by the superintendent.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the nominations.
I'll second
Seconded by Kyle. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. None opposed, that passes. Okay, we'll move on to item 10.7, substitute teacher rate increase. We had received an email, I think, on this.
Yeah, Deb Clark's been kind of bringing this up at least since I've been in the last 2 years, to say, we always struggle, I think every school system does, but we struggle finding substitutes. And usually we have a small group that keep coming back, but there's sometimes when, we do a little research every once in a while. And I think it's been at least 7 years since we've adjusted that substitute rate, daily rate, and it's been $70 for a while. And so, we've talked about this before, but, I think I put an email to you, Brunswick, 75, and Wiscasset, all around us, are paying $75 a day. And again, I think it's just to be competitive that we should at least consider doing this. It's not a lot of money, and, Deb and Ruthie have looked at the budget, what we budgeted, and look at last year, what we actually spent, and this is, we can afford to do this, to raise it from 70 to 75. So I just wanted to put that on the agenda tonight to see if you had questions, or whether you were ready to look to vote so we could start the new year with a $75 rate.
I can attest to the fact that this is probably the hardest teaching job there is in any school system, and they earn every penny that they have. And I think it's very essential that we make sure that they have materials to teach by. That was always a pet peeve of mine, that a teacher would be out and there wouldn't be material left there to teach. That's wasted time. That's too much money for babysitters. We're hiring substitutes, and they earn it.
And they're typically, you're looking at 7 to 7.5, 8-hour day in some cases, depending on what time they get there in the morning after school, when they fill out the paperwork to give back to the regular teacher about how the day went. If you figure out the hourly rate, it's not very
Pretty
high.
small.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I'd like to
Questions?
I'd like to move that it be approved, that the increase be approved.
I'll second it.
I still have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Steve.
I just wonder, what is our utilization of substitutes? Do you know?
What do you mean by utilization?
Well-
The number.
Daily?
Yeah, do you know? Do you have any
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I can get that for you and send it to you, but
Yeah,
I don't
it's
have
just a,
yeah.
Yeah,
You
we
mean, you're
talked
talking
about that.
You're talking about the number of
Annual.
subs, or how many we use in a year?
Annual expenditures on subs?
Annual expenditures and, yeah.
Hmm.
The boy.
I honestly can't think of that
I mean,
right
just,
right
if you
now.
can just email it, it's not
Sure.
gonna,
Send it out.
I would support an increase, I just wonder.
Okay, and there are no contractual implications for making this change? This falls outside of any of the contracts we have within the district. Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion for an increase, raise your hand. None opposed, that passes. Okay, once again, we'll open it up to the floor. Item 11.0, public comment. Nope, I guess not.
Public left.
All right, we'll move on to item 12, set next meeting. We don't have a date chosen. Our next meeting would be in August. Patrick, did you have a date in mind?
26 is the fourth Monday. I have it down on my calendar, but I mean, that coincides with our usual schedule.
So it's 26, you said?
Yeah.
Does anybody have an issue with the 26th?
And I would, the reason we met here tonight is, I should have done this last month, but, we're trying to clean and move a lot of stuff around our school, so, in the summertime, it's more convenient to have it here, and I think it works okay, so if you guys are all right with it, we can meet here on the 26th.
Okay. All right, so we'll plan on meeting here, conference room C, on the 26th at 6 p.m. I just want to add this now. Okay, next item is item 13. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Steve,
Second?
seconded by Bill. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to adjourn? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
I didn't hear from him.
Fine.